The Real Agenda of the Gates Foundation. Section: Land Mobility, not Land Reform. Hunger, claims the Gates Foundation website, is rooted in, quote, population growth, rising incomes, dwindling natural resources, and a changing climate, and is best addressed by enhancing agricultural productivity. Unmentioned is the fact that per capita food production has been trending upward for decades and remains at historic highs, meaning that hunger is an issue of unequal distribution rather than inadequate productivity. Extensive scholarship shows also that food insecurity has been greatly exacerbated over recent decades by massive dispossession of small farmers, depriving millions of their livelihoods. Contra Gates, the food crisis is not one of, quote, rising incomes, but of vanishing incomes. Although Foundation publicity pays lip service to the idea of sustainable smallholder agriculture, in fact, its initiatives are uniformly directed towards high-tech, high-yield farming methods, much like the, quote, Green Revolution technologies that proved ultimately ruinous for rural peasantries beginning in the 1960s. Gates works closely with agribusiness giant Monsanto through organizations like the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa, AGRA, which steers billions in grant money primarily to biotech and GMO research. The Foundation has also thrown its weight behind a revival of Grameen-style microbanking schemes, which transpired during the 2000s to be a debt trap leading to dispossession of rural families. Far from empowering small farmers, BMGF's efforts envision the exit of, quote, inefficient small farmers from their land, a process euphemistically termed, quote, land mobility, as revealed by an internal memo leaked to the press in 2008. Quote, in order to transition agriculture from the current situation of low investment, low productivity, and low returns to a market-oriented, highly productive system, it is essential that supply, productivity, and demand, market access, expand together. This involves market-oriented farmers operating profitable farms that generate enough income to sustain their rise out of poverty. Over time, this will require some degree of land mobility and a lower percentage of total employment involved in direct agricultural production. End quote. The impact of these policies on small farmers and their families is disastrous. As Fred Magdoff recently explained, quote, the world capitalist economy is no longer able to provide productive employment for the huge numbers of people losing their lands. Thus, the fate of those migrating to cities or other countries is commonly to live in slums and to exist precariously within the, quote, informal economy, end quote. Indeed, the Foundation's agricultural policy strikingly resembles what Samir Amin describes as the logical outcome of subjecting agriculture to the same market principles as any other branch of production. 20 million industrial farmers producing the world's food supply in place of today's 3 billion peasants. As Amin observes, quote, the conditions for the success of such an alternative would include 1. The transfer of important pieces of good land to the new capitalist farmers, and these lands would have to be taken out of the hands of the present peasant populations. 2. Capital, to buy supplies and equipment. And 3. access to the consumer markets. Such farmers would indeed compete successfully with the billions of present peasants. But what would happen to those billions of people? End of quote. Amin's analysis chimes with the Gates Foundation memo quoted above, and there is reason to believe that BMGF is already contemplating strategies for coping with the, quote, surplus population that the processes of accumulation and dispossession are generating. End of section.